Here we go with chapter 6, the King's Indian Defense. This is starting with d4, knight of 6, knight of 3, g6. And we're going to aim for a similar setup kind of in this chapter as well as in the next chapter, which is other king's side fianchetto positions for black.
Yeah, and I like this chapter because it's different than what you're going to see in a lot of other London books, or courses rather. But a lot of times we're going to recommend, or we're not going to recommend, but other London chapters recommend this Jabava London setup, and that's a great system to play against this. But what we're recommending is much more consistent with the rest of the repertoire for one, and it also allows black to blunder and make mistakes very easily if they play their automatic moves. And we're going to see that in a lot of lines here. So after g6, we're going to go ahead with bishop f4, bishop g7. So black is just playing normal King's Indian. And h3. So already an early little wrinkle here. Is this just to save the bishop?
Yeah, so it's kind of a safeguard against this knight to h5 move. We just really don't want to trade the bishop for the knight this early. So now castle for black, pawn to e3, and now if you see knight h5, you can safely tuck that bishop away on h2. d6, and here we're recommending bishop to e2. So we don't want the bishop on d3. It just runs into these kingside fianchetto pawns for black. So we're going to put the bishop on e2, and the stats are pretty good here, Jesse. 52% win rate for white, 41% win rate for black. This is club level database. This is our starting point, and we're going to look at 6 different moves here for black. So this is kind of the main branching point of the chapter.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting stats. So I wouldn't actually expect it to be so high for white there because this is very much in black's territory. Like I feel like white does a lot of the Jobava London systems. It almost seems like white is a little out of book, a little shaky, and black has exactly what they want. So that's good. So that's showing us that just by default, it's a little easier to play for white. So let's branch off from here. First move we're going to look at is knight b d7. All right, so it looks like they're just adding up a little more pressure here to play e5. That's kind of like the main idea in a lot of these lines.
Yeah. So usually you'll see e5. Sometimes you'll see c5. But in my games, I find e5 is probably like 80% of the time. Like that's the plan, main plan for black. All right, so castle. So far, everything's pretty easy to play. Rook e8. And now when you see rook e8, that means black is going e5, right? So they're not going to play rook e8 to play c5 or to play c6. Black really wants e5. A lot of times, this move is a mistake in this chapter. That's why this is really fun. So we're going to recommend knight c3 here, threatening e4 and letting black play e5. Be our guest. Go ahead and play it.
Yeah, it's almost like, oh, we're just ignoring this threat, but maybe pretending like we don't see it or something.
Yeah.
That's actually a great way to win games at like the 1000 to 2000 level. It's like allow your opponent to make a threat that you know is no good,
Hmm.
or make a move that you know is no good.
I like
But
it. Yeah. You want e5? I'll just, yeah, let you do it. I'll pretend
like,
I
oh,
don't see the threat
like,
coming.
oh no, my your e5 break. But all right, let's follow this through a little bit. So, we have a note in the course here. It says this move is played. So, in over 1,000 games, this move is played almost 2/3 of the time, and it's actually a mistake. So, how can we exploit this?
So we're going to take the pawn. D takes e5. And after d takes e5 back, we're going to play knight takes e5. And notice how our queens are lined up, right? So this rook is trying to attack e5 as the second attacker after the knight. The rook is also trying to defend the queen. And the main move here is knight takes e5. And now we can hit black with a tactic to regain the piece and be up a pawn in the end.
Yep. So this rook is overloaded, and you can see it's defending two pieces here. So we have this insertion, or what's the like intermezzo. So queen takes queen, rook takes, and we pick up the knight back. So we're up a clean pawn here, and we're also attacking this pawn. This just seems like it's winning.
Yeah, this is definitely conversion mode. We go a little bit deeper in the course just to kind of show you how to develop. C6, we're going to put the rook on d1, fighting for this open file. It's the only open file on the board, so it's important to fight for it. Bishop f5, poking at the c pawn. And here we play bishop d3. We're following 19 games in the database. Engines saying like +1 for white, pretty comfortable so far.
Yep. And if they trade, I think taking back here either way is just fine. So if we take back with the pawn, we get to repair our structure a little bit. If we take back with the rook, then we're just inviting more trades, which we're happy with because we're up a clean pawn. So either way is just fine. Let's take back with the rook. They take. We're happy to take back with the pawn. Let's go a little further even. So let's say a black pressures the d pawn. You could either push, you could bring the rook over. Either one is going to be a fine move. Let's just go d4 here. And white has a tremendous position. And it's pretty much all because black misplayed e5. So it looks like they were just kind of like pre-moving their opening, and they found themselves in a losing endgame.
Yep, and the plan here is we're going to probably put our rook on c1. We'll go for that bishop trade if black allows it, and then move the knight around and start poking at these queenside pawns. Probably try to advance b and a. Bring the king to the center. I don't know if I mentioned that part yet. But yeah, we're just going to focus queenside. This is a +3 when you run Stockfish Deep eval. Right? +3 eval, and all we've done is made simple moves, allowed the threat of e5, and just reacted to it with tactics. So this is main line of this chapter, meaning when you see the kid, the King's Indian Defense, this is what you're most likely to see at the club level, a +3 position.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a very sneaky move order to allow e5 at the exact wrong time.
Yeah. So now, instead of going back to move 1, let's keep going back to this branching point for this chapter. 6 bishop e2, and we're going to go knight b d7 again. Castle, rook e8, knight c3, e5, takes, knight takes. But now, instead of knight takes back, let's look at a fun line. Knight to h5. So here, bishop takes h5 is a pretty good move, but it's only the second best move. And the first move is clearly better. So what do we play here, Jesse?
Yeah, so we have a nice little shot here. And we're going to start by taking, nope, not that way. Sorry. Knight takes f7. So we're really opening up these light squares. This is, if I saw this move on the board, I'd be already a little scared. I'd be like, wait, that doesn't work. And then you start calculating and you're like, oh, I guess maybe it does kind of work. So let's take a look at what happens if they take back with the king.
Yeah, so 8 out of 9 players took back with the king. If you don't take back with the king, we were on the queen and we were going to play like knight h6 check to get the knight out of there, and we're up 2 pawns. So king takes back. Here we go bishop to c4 check. Only move that keeps the advantage, but that's a pretty natural looking move. And now the black king cannot run back to g8 and get to safety. So it's stuck. King f8 is the most common move, and now we have this crushing move, queen to d5, threatening queen to f7 mate. Also, maybe queen to g8 check, depending on what black does. And the eval here is like +8 for white. Black's already completely busted. So what's the most common move?
Yeah, I'm trying to even look for a good defense here. Like I'm only seeing rook up, but that's just checkmate. And then I think queen f6 is the most common move.
Yeah,
But that is checkmate, my friend.
and this one looks like at first glance, maybe it's holding, right? But there's check
Yeah.
here. King runs, knight d5 check, king runs, and the bishop mates in the end.
I love it. I love it.
So
Queen
that's,
is just a decoy over here.
yeah. So that's 2 lines down, the 2 most common lines, where black went rook e8, e5. We've seen 1 checkmate and 1 +3 so far. All right, so now let's go back to our move number 6. We have 1 more line with knight b to d7, castle. And now here we're going to look at pawn to c5. It's the other way of striking at the center when black doesn't play e5.
Yep. So no rook over this time. We're starting with an immediate c5. And in other chapters, we would always meet c5 with c3. Here we're going to meet c5 with c4. So this trade is totally fine for us. It's a little scary to allow the opening up of this bishop, but it's going to be staring at our pawn anyway. So let's take and take back with our e-pawn. So we have like this kind of like a hanging pawn structure, but we do have some support over here as well.
And I do like that our D pawn keeps control of these two squares. So keep an eye on that knight. The knight wants to go to E5 or C5, maybe pawn E5. This pawn does a great job controlling the dark squares. So B6 for black, trying to get their last minor piece in the game. Knight to C3. And what I like here is, even though, like Jesse said, these pawns are potential weaknesses, they're also really good pawns for controlling that 5th rank. We bring our knight to the center. And here we have nice control of all of the central squares. And if you look at the club level database, white's winning 58%, black's winning 36%. So in practice, the center is favoring white.
Yeah, and I think one thing to really keep in mind is to have these pawns hang out here as long as possible without trying to advance, because they're controlling so much surface area on the board. We can always like reinforce here with B3. But I think we're actually going to advance in the next couple moves, so I'm eating my words.
So in this chapter, yeah, we will look to play D5, but Jesse's right. In general, you want to keep these pawns next to each other because they control dark and light squares. You only want to push when there's a good reason to do it. And in this case, this is the good reason to do it. That bishop is on the long diagonal. So now we are going to play D5. And we'll see this idea in other lines in the chapter as well. And look at this square for the knight, Jesse. Knight coming to D4. That looks pretty.
Yeah, beautiful square. And yeah, look at this very sad bishop. So D5 makes all the sense positionally here to just shut up that bishop. And I think we want to trade for black's dark square bishop if we get the chance. It's a little ways out yet. All right, so let's shut out the bishop with D5. All right, knight C5, and we're going right for it with knight D4. This is a nice move, bringing our knight exactly where it wants to be, right in the middle of the board.
And now we have that F3 square for our bishop. I think I put a typo in the text. The bishop F3 is the plan, lining up with that bishop. So now most common move, knight F to E4. And this doesn't slow us down at all. I get why black is playing this. They want to trade a couple minor pieces off because black's position is more cramped. But we can simply take bishop F3, knight retreats, and now rook E1. And look at how well placed all of these pieces are. Everything seems pretty good. Like we highlighted before, that's a bad bishop. So what's the eval here, and what's our plan going forward in the next few moves?
Yeah, so if you let Stockfish run for a while, the eval is going to land somewhere in the neighborhood of +2, which is wonderful. Plans going forward is so we want to basically utilize our well-placed bishops and play against White's pretty terrible bishop. So let's look for moves or something like, so we kind of want to look at what Black wants to do too. So Black would love to play E6 or B5 at some point. So let's plan to play moves like Queen D1. I see Queen D1 in the text, maybe Queen D2.
Queen D2, Rook AC1, Pawn B4, something like that. If Black plays A5, we could plant our knight on B5. So yeah, a lot of nice moves in this position, like Jesse mentioned. +2 eval according to the engine. So now we've seen a +3, a checkmate, and a +2 3 lines in. So maybe we can find something better for black on move 6. Let's go away from knight B to D7. That's what we just looked at for the first 3 lines. Let's try knight to C6. Which pawn break do you think black's going for here?
Yeah, well, there's only one option. They just blocked their own C pawn, so I think we're going to be waiting for E5. So let's get our king to safety. Generally, if there's going to be a pawn break in the middle, we want our king to safety. Otherwise, your king could get stuck in the middle. So let's castle out of that. E5 does work there immediately, but let's give black a move rook E8 to kind of prep it a little bit. And knight C3 here. So notice that we are playing knight C3 in a lot of these lines. That's maybe a little bit like against the advice of our previous chapters, but it makes sense against the King's Indian in particular. And let's look at E5. So this is another slightly premature playing of E5.
Yeah, and this is the same position we looked at, except this knight was on D7. So we're showing this line to show how you can get to it from this move order. This move E5 was played in over 50% of the games at the club level, and that's 300 plus games. So we're going to take again, take, and then you have to remember here, go for the queen trade. Rook takes back. Now we take e5, and an overwhelming majority of players take this knight, and we're right back to the main line. So we got that advantage again. And one thing I like about this chapter so far, the first 7 moves have been the same no matter what black does. Like we are just playing on autopilot, putting the bishop on e2 with the early h3, e3, castle. It's so easy to play. And then we're just letting black play e5 or c5 and reacting to whichever they do.
Yeah, so far black is 0-3 for playing e5.
All right, so let's look at one more knight c6 line. We castle. And now let's look at knight d7. Now wait a second. Is black actually ready to play e5? I think so. Like black is now finally prepared enough to play e5. But we're going to keep consistent, play knight c3. And in this case, e5 is not a mistake by black, and it's actually the strongest move. So this is a higher level line for black after e5.
Yeah, so now black has the extra reinforcement with the other knight, but also the bishop, and so we can't just liquidate everything. So we don't we can't take this pawn. I mean, I guess you could take once or something. But let's back our bishop off and kind of see how black is going to continue. In this line, we're looking at f5, so very ambitious move here. I'm looking at these light squares. Nothing we can really do about it right now, but that's going to be like a long-term idea to kind of keep in your mind. So in this exact position, we're actually going to play d takes e5. So what's the idea behind taking kind of a move later?
So we waited for black to play f5. The reason for that is because black's going to have this pawn structure, and we will have this diagonal to utilize. So once that f pawn moved off of f7, diagonal opens up. So we're letting black expand and then opening the center up, and we're going to try to attack black with the pieces. So d takes e5. We have this cool move. This is one to remember, bishop to b5. And you don't have to memorize a lot of move orders in this chapter, but kind of knowing this idea is nice. The threat here is queen to d5 check, picking up the knight in the end with the queen being able to take back. So we're actually threatening to win a pawn with bishop to b5, and this is just getting a little bit uncomfortable for black with these minor pieces back here.
Especially with these light square weaknesses too. Like you almost think black is just gonna like kick the king over, which actually is like a decent move here. And that's actually what they're gonna play. So I didn't look ahead. So king h8, solid move, and we're gonna do queen d5 anyway. And we're still threatening to win a pawn here. And there's actually not a great way to defend it that I can see, except maybe moving this knight out of the way. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
black could try to sacrifice it. But our plan is pretty straightforward too. We're going to play rook d1, win that pawn if given the chance. But then we're also eyeing this pawn, right? So if black tries knight f6, for example, that's going to create some problems with this pawn. Like we can trade
Oh, yeah.
queens and win the e pawn. So black is really tied down here. Eval's only plus 0.7, so not as large of an advantage, but I think in practical terms, this is way more difficult for black to find a way out than for us to play it.
Yeah, it seems like we have a pretty easy plan here, just like chip away at the king side too. It's one thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, right. Try to just soften up that king position because the black king has no moves.
Yep.
All right, let's try to find something even better for black. Maybe we can go with a quick c5. That was probably, spoiler, that was probably black's best line of this chapter. I think it was. Let's go with 6c5. Is this any different than the other lines, Jesse?
Um, well, we're gonna play the same thing. We're gonna castle. But it's different in that they play c5 instead of e5. But c5 is actually a good move there, so they're not blundering anything. So we could go for this liquidation and trade the queens, but there's not really much to play for, so we're not going to go for that. So they take, and we have a slight decision here for which way to take back, if we want to take back at all.
Yeah, so
So
we're going to take with the e pawn. Again, going for that control, c5 and e5 squares. We've seen this pawn structure. And after
is that a
knight,
theme for the chapter where you like generally want to take back in the center with pawns?
yeah, yep. So we want that pawn to control these two squares. It's almost always going to be what we do. I don't think we have any lines, at least in the course, where we don't take back with the pawn in this chapter.
Yeah.
So now We're about to see this d5 idea again, Jesse. Knight c6 was just played, and we're going to hit it immediately with pawn to d5, putting this wedge on the light squares. And our plan is just like in the other line we looked at, c4, knight c3, knight to d4, and bishop to f3. So we're going to try to just create that same setup. Real easy for you guys to play as students because you're just doing these same types of setups over and over, almost no matter what black does.
Only thing I'm concerned about here is what if they take our pawn, the knight?
Oh, with the b2 pawn?
Yeah,
We don't cover that in the course. So let's
bonus
say
material.
queen takes d5. Yep, bishop takes b2. Knight b to d2. Take the rook, and then we take back.
Okay, I guess we get 2 pieces.
So we're down 1 point, but this is a common exchange sack. I'm actually really glad you pointed this out, Jesse. We should add to the text. When you lose the fianchetto bishop like this for a rook, it causes some potential problems for the king. And in this position, the engine does like white quite a bit because you can see this dark square bishop is uncontested. And then if that rook has to move, it softens up this f pawn. This is one where probably we should have it like at least a bonus video on YouTube, kind of talking through the lines. All right, good suggestion. Okay, let's go now to knight b4. It's more common in the club level database. And we're going to play pawn to c4, defending this d pawn and grabbing extra space in the center.
Yeah, so this position, like this knight is already looking a little sketchy. Like it has 1 square, and so it's not going to be happy there anyway. So bishop f5, knight c3, knight e4, and I just like want to find a way to win this knight and punish our opponent, but it's just not quite there, unfortunately.
And I think,
And we're gonna. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, I think black is going for the trades again, right? Like they want to just clear up this congestion a little bit. And we're going to take again. The knight d4 is coming soon. Bishop takes, knight d4. Eval's plus 1.7. Got the space advantage. We got the initiative. What's our plan here coming up?
Yeah, so I was just looking at what happens if takes, and then they fork us, the knight.
And then we get the,
But
yeah,
we get the bishop and we get 2 pieces for it. So something that's just going through my head. So, so what we want to do, so queen d2, we'll try to move our knight. I think knight b5 is a nice square for the knight. And then moves like bishop e3, and then maybe we want to trade the dark square bishops or something. And yeah, put the rooks in the center and just kind of enjoy the position.
yeah, I'm liking this a lot. There was one other thing I wanted to mention. Right here, watch out for this threat. Knight c2 to trap the rook. So we showed knight to c3, but just make sure you don't fall for that. Like let's say you play queen to d2 here or something. Black is going to go for that rook in the corner.
Yep, and that's winning an exchange without having to give up their good bishop. So
Yeah,
now
that's a
it's
good
a
exchange.
lot worse.
All right, so we got one more c5 line to look at. c5, the standard castle. Now let's look at knight to c6. And what does this move encourage us to play when we see that knight hit c6 with the c5?
Yeah, I'm just immediately thinking of d5 to kick that knight. And so that's what we're gonna do. And again, this knight, like it's not gonna go back, but it is gonna go back.
There's not many routes for it. That's the problem for black. Where do you put the knight if not b8?
Yeah, I guess try to go b4, and then it's just gonna get kicked again. The
Yeah.
problem is now our bishop can take here and completely mess up their pawns if they go for that.
So that knight wishes it was on d7, connected with its other friend.
Yeah.
I won't do any of the horse jokes. Wrong
Okay.
chapter for that. So this is like the other lines, except we are not going to play c4 here. And the reason for not playing c4 is because queen to b6 actually leads to equality in this position. Black gets some quick pressure on us. So we're going to play knight to c3. And this is the way that we can play for an advantage. We are still shutting down black's queenside play. There's no b5. So you see this pawn chain. Black wants to play queenside. This is the main idea. We have knight and bishop on it. So keep that in mind. Let's just shut down b5, but we're doing it with the pawn back on c2 in this line.
Yeah, and if black insists with a6, we just play a4, and then we continue to shut down b5. That's kind of a thematic defensive move here.
And that's the most common move. Yep, a6.
Oh, we're going for it. Okay, a6. Let's go a5, and we're going to again shut down the b5 idea. I swear I didn't look ahead. All right. Okay, knight bd7. So now this knight is getting to a happy, stable square.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Only one, only one. Okay. And e4 here. So interesting move. I like this idea.
Yeah, so the idea with e4 is we want to play queen to d2, opening up this diagonal to get that bishop, offer the trade for the dark square bishop, like Jesse mentioned in the other line. That's a strong attacking position. Black does not want to get rid of that fianchetto bishop. So the most common move is knight to h5. And here, almost any bishop move is good. You just don't want to allow it to trade for this knight. So I kind of played through a bunch of lines, and I think the best move in terms of practical chances, and it's a good engine move as well, is bishop to e3. And now, after knight to e5, this move is more common than any other move by a ratio of 6-1. This is actually a blunder. Black wants to trade minor pieces off again. How do we take advantage of this?
Yeah, so I'm seeing a few lines here. So if we take and they take back with the pawn, we win this pawn. So if we take, they're forced to take back with the bishop. And I'm seeing our queen and bishop lined up against this other knight. And that's going to be a nasty pawn to win and a great square for our queen. So I think we should just go for that. Knight takes, bishop takes, h5. Got to take back with the pawn. That is looking ugly. And we don't even have to take back. I guess just a nice developing move is even better. And this looks awful. And I just want to bring the queen up right here. That's
Yeah,
exactly what I want to do.
I think the best move for black is to offer this bishop trade. But our plan here is we're going to bring the queen out. Queen takes h5. We're probably going to play f4, maybe do a rook lift, or bring the other rook to the center. All of these pieces are coming towards the black king. Jesse's idea may work as well, depending what black does. Like maybe you just go for queen g5 and a mate. But this is +4 eval.
Yeah, and look at this. So black drops their bishop back. We take, they take. Look at these pieces. They're all on the back row. They're so sad. Our pieces are getting into the game so quick. I like f4, and then you can like bring the rook over and check. That's just like such a good attacking. It's just such a
Yeah,
good attack.
I love it. So we got 3 lines to go, and they're all different moves on move number 6. So we're going back to this position. We're going to look at rook e8. We will look at b6, and then we'll look at c6, just to give you some different flavors that you might see in this position. And let's start, Jesse, with rook to e8, going for that e5 break again. And what do we do? Move number 7.
And guess what? We castle. So we're not being creative here, but these are good moves. So e5, and this looks like a mistake, man.
Yeah, let's take it. D takes e5. And black is going down material. D takes. Trade the queens first. Recapture. Now we're going to go bishop takes e5. So there was no knight guard in this pawn. We were actually ahead by 2 attackers. So black really lost track of what was going on with those trades. And now our bishop is lined up with this one, which is just a nice diagonal for us.
Yeah, and there's really no way to, to kick this bishop because it's already defended. So I don't know what Black was thinking there, but that's like the most common move, which
Yeah.
is just crazy. Black just autopilots that in so many lines where it's terrible.
And most common here is knight c6, attacking the bishop, but that leaves this pawn hanging.
No, yeah.
And we're looking at 72% win rate for white, 26% for black in the club database, 47 games. We're taking that pawn. Now, this is great. This is a crazy stat. This is 32 games, 24 out of 32 games. Black plays rook to d7. The other remaining 8 move the rook to either e8 or d5. Sorry, I'm just reading the text. So
Mhm.
all of the games in the club level database, all 32 are rook moves. And the best moves are knight moves, knight e8 and knight d5. So nobody is finding the knight moves, which is just insane. Like every single game, white is winning in terms of the computer advantage.
That's crazy that the best move is just to give up the rook.
Yeah,
I guess the idea is to move the knight and attack our B pawn.
right.
Okay, I see it now. But yeah, that's a hard one to see.
So rook d7, most common.
Yeah. Bishop back, and yeah, we are up We have the pawns and the compensation, as they say. So we have the material and everything going for us in the position. There's no good knight discovery here to try to like win this pawn or something. We'll just play c3. And now that bishop's not looking so good anymore, just looking at our pawns. So nothing to play for at all for black, honestly. And we did nothing. We just took the free pawn, took the other free pawn, and black just autopiloted their way to a loss.
And you can start to see the reason why we're recommending um, going for this kind of standard King's Indian defense, or sorry, standard London setup for white against the King's Indian defense and not going for the Jobava, just because all of these lines at the club level are working out well for white. And it just allows us to play kind of a similar flavor to the other London chapters. Now let's go to b6. We found a case where black finally isn't in a hurry to push one of these pawns. But this looks strange to me because this diagonal was already opened up for the bishop. Now you're playing b6, opening this diagonal. And usually that's a little bit slow. But in this case, it's actually not terrible. And what we're going to do is we're going to play quiet. We're going to meet kind of an odd pawn move with one of our own. And we're just going to play pawn to c3. And you're going to see a similar idea in the Queen's Indian chapter, where we're actually just looking to play solid pawn chain on the dark squares and then maybe eventually play e4.
Yeah, sounds good. I feel like we ran into a unicorn where we're playing a King's Indian defense player who's also patient. They're waiting for the right time to play e5.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen all the time. So, okay, let's c3, bishop b7, and a4. So this is a common theme just kind of throughout all of chess, is when you see this fianchetto setup, you can kind of poke at it and create a weakness. So this is an interesting idea, a4. Knight bd7, and we are ready to castle. So we actually didn't castle on move 7 this time. First time all chapter. And then a5 comes next. So what are we looking at here?
So black wants to play e5 still eventually. We were going to play a5 there after castling, but the moves are pretty similar, so don't worry too much about the move order. And here what we're going to do is we're going to tuck this bishop back. And we're going to allow black to prepare this e5 break, and we'll just get ready for it. So rook e8, most common. e5 is definitely on deck. And we're going to play rook to e1. And this move looks strange at first, but you'll see why coming up. On to e5 for black. And again, we're not going to capture this, so we're only really capturing when there's a strong reason to. And that strong reason is usually we win the pawn. We're going to play knight to a3. Keep in mind here, nothing has been traded yet. Every single piece is on the board.
Yeah, for sure. So I think if they take, the idea is to take back with the pawn and kind of open up our rook. Let's kind of look at what happens instead of that, though. If after we develop the knight, e4. So this looks like a bad positional move because this bishop is locked in, and now we're kind of tying up this bishop too.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've seen at the club level, and we've talked about this in other chapters, nobody likes keeping tension on the board, right? Those pawns had tension. Players are going to either take or push. But now we can work around this almost like some sort of French defense in reverse, right? Now we have this pawn chain. We're hoping that this is the weakest pawn on the board on e4, and we're going to fight against that. So d5, and here we can play knight to b5. And all of a sudden, look at our pieces come to life, and black has the center locked up, but really that extra space hasn't played out yet for black, and we're going to try to play on the queen side with b4 coming up.
Yeah, so that's a sneaky move. So knight b5, you expect the knight to kind of like reroute or something like that, but yeah, coming all the way up to b5 and hitting that pawn, that's a tricky move. So rook c8, that's kind of the only reason, or the only move to defend that. If you're good with the perpetual, maybe you just go rook a or knight a7 and take the draw against like a 2200 or something like
That's a
that.
good point, yeah. I wouldn't take a draw against a 2200. Are you kidding me?
Well, you are a
I was just kidding.
2200.
So b4. Now we play b4. And this c pawn can't move because knight d6,
No,
some
yeah.
sort of triple fork going on. But b4 is a strong move because we have the advantage queenside. This bishop is trapped kingside. This knight's trapped kingside. Look at our bishops. This is definitely where we want to be playing. Black needs to get this kind of pawn break going on the f file. Um, yeah, eval here is +2 thanks to these factors. And if a takes b4, we're going to take with the c pawn. And then this becomes the weakest pawn on the board, and we're just going to pile up on the c file. Yeah, what do you think about this position, Jesse?
Yeah, I like this position a lot. It seems like all the file openings are happening in our favor. Black's bishops are not happy at all. Our bishops have at least a little influence. And so, yeah, this looks much better for white.
Another thing we mentioned in the notes, if black just sits still, does nothing with these pawns, we're going to take here. They take back. And then we're going to play knight to b3 and c4. So knight b3 attacks that pawn. c4 strikes at the center. And just everything's rolling on that side. We're not going to allow black to shut down our queenside play.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
one move left. Jesse, move 6. We're now looking at pawn to c6. Only played about 5% of the time, but I wanted to show this because it's a different idea for black. This is almost like a Pirt's defense, or a modern defense, where black's going to play either b5, or if we shut down b5, they're probably going to play knight d7 and e5. So it's kind of a flexible move, but it's something new because we haven't looked at this b5 idea with a pawn on c6 yet.
hmm Yeah, I actually kind of like the look of that move. Again, a nice patient move and being flexible. So I think flexibility is like a good thing at these at the club level games as well. Okay, so guess what? We castle on move 7.
We're back.
Yeah, yeah, we're back. Knight BD7. So again, prepping maybe one of these pawn breaks. C5 would be a little weird after playing C6. So let's play A4, and I assume this is to shut down this B5 idea, right?
Yep, that's right. So now, rook e8. And this kind of shows black's hand. They're finally looking at playing e5. And we're going to prepare for it. Bishop to h2. Most players go with the break, Jesse. And now we are going to take, and we're going to hold on to this extra pawn again. D takes e5.
Yeah, same thing. This rook is just overloaded in every single one of these lines, and it's crazy how often it gets played. So this is not just like us choosing easy lines to play against. This is what you really see when I was playing this type of stuff like London and like Catalan. You get similar positions. I saw e5 prematurely all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you always just hang on to the pawn. It's like a free pawn. It's almost like a free game if you can convert the end game. It's really crazy.
In our classical d4 course, or Queen's Gambit course now we call it, we have the h3 King's Indian line. In those lines, there's an f5 pawn break for black. And it's very similar. Almost always black plays f5 and boom, all of a sudden white has the advantage and everyone plays it. Like they just can't get out of that standard plan mindset.
Yeah, it's like even when they know it's not good, it's like, well, this is what we do here. So
Yeah,
I'm sure it's fine. I just got to figure out the complications, but not the way we play. We allow it and we punish it. Let's just keep going. So instead of liquidating knight e4, and that's actually like a slightly tricky move, adding a little more pressure here and adding some pressure on b2.
we have a smooth reply here. Knight to d3. The knight retreats to safety and the pawn is defended. And that's a pawn without any compensation for black. So we're looking at like a +1 stockfish eval. Black has pretty active pieces, but so do we. So it's kind of balanced. In some lines, we were up the pawn and we had the extra play. Here it's extra pawn, plays about equal. And what we want to play here is knight to d2, offering a trade of this strong knight. Rook to a3, which is kind of a cool idea, making use of this a pawn. Then we'll probably move the queen to d2 after that rook or knight trade happens, and rook to d1. So get the rook and queen on the open file, get this rook ready to come over later. Everything's looking good, and we're up this pawn on the e file.
Yeah, so another pawn win, and yeah, this retreating move is so smooth. I love it, defending the pawn. Yeah, so I think that is a good representative of what you're going to see in the King's Indian. So a lot of these first moves are going to be the exact same no matter who you're playing. So it's nice to get a couple of these like alternative seventh moves, and just showing why e5 doesn't work in a lot of the lines that we're playing against.
Yep. And then coming up in the next chapter, we have other kingside Fianchetto variations. So we'll see you guys in chapter 7.